I want to go back to something you said on Tuesday. You said, I think all of us know the Electoral College needs to go. But the campaign came out later that night, and they said that's not their stance.
Yeah. Well, it's not the campaign's position. The campaign's position is clear, that that's not their position. Their position and my position is to make sure that everybody understands their vote, no matter what state they're in, matters.
So that's something that you and Vice President Harris disagree on?
I have spoken about it in the past, that she's been very clear on this, and the campaign, and my position is the campaign's position.
Tim Walz just got caught disagreeing with Kamala Harris, called out by it by this media reporter, Michael Strahan, and he gives this word salad answer to try to back up and support the campaign, even though he doesn't support the campaign. And we're going to dive into this full interview and get more insights into the Tim Walz lies that he continues to promote. And thankfully, we had this reporter actually call him out on this. It's itsSeanDaniel here. If you guys enjoy the political videos, feel free to subscribe. And the reason what Tim Walz was getting called out about was what he said about the Electoral College, our voting system for the presidential election. And he said, according to CNN, that it needs to go at a California fundraiser this week. This is what he said. I think all of us know the Electoral College needs to go. We need national popular vote, but that's not the world we live in. So we need to win Beaver County, Pennsylvania. We need to be able to go into York, Pennsylvania and win. We need to be in western Wisconsin and win. We need to be in Reno, Nevada and win. And he said this to supporters at a fundraiser at none other than Governor Gavin Newsom's private residence in Sacramento. And then Walz got called out on this, and the Harris campaign said that this is not an official campaign position. So he said something publicly about the voting that the Harris campaign denies. And it's interesting that he was willing to say this at a private residence fundraiser with a bunch of powerful people, a bunch of people with a bunch of money. But maybe he slipped up and got excited and maybe even revealed some of the plans in which these powerful people in California support. But he wasn't willing to say this on a major stage at a rally, which would be really a minor stage because their rallies have like 0 people. Now let's break down this whole interview, see what he says, and then we're going to get even more into breaking down the illogic of what he claims, why he was talking about the Electoral College, why he's campaigning. Well, let's see the whole thing.
Vice President Harris was asked this week on The View if she would have done anything differently than President Biden that he has done in the past 4 years. And she said, quote, "There is not a thing that comes to mind." And she later said she would have a Republican in her cabinet.
Yeah.
And when it comes to President Biden and the presidency, do you see anything that you would have done differently?
Yeah, and look, as a governor, I was asked to be governor of this state when Donald Trump was president and when Joe Biden was there. And I watched Donald Trump dismiss the COVID pandemic. I watched him drive an economy into the ground. And I watched Joe Biden and Kamala Harris pick those pieces up.
This is going to be a pause-a-thon. I hope you guys are ready for it because I'm going to have to stop with... I'm going to try to not pause too much, but he says so much wrongful things. The economy that Trump drove into the ground, that was COVID, sir. And the mandates that you yourself, Tim Walz, put in, your buddy Gavin Newsom in California put in, that stopped businesses from reopening, that stopped people from being able to function out on the streets and out on the beaches, like in California, that drove the economy into the ground. And COVID did, and how you guys restricted people from functioning, compared to the states like Florida where Republican Ron DeSantis let people function, let people open businesses. There's the first one. First pause.
And I think for all of us, we make decisions, we reanalyze afterwards. I think the thing that drew me to this ticket, and I think what the vice president's talking about, is that her values on these hasn't changed. They have been working for the middle class. They've been doing all they can to make sure prices come down. They're protecting reproductive care.
So it makes me want to ask you, do you think that Biden's done everything right?
good question.
Look, I don't know if any of us do everything right, but I can tell you he's
of
done
course.
everything in the best interest of the American public. He's listened to what the public said. He's asked for answers, and I think, and reevaluated afterwards. And I think if your values and the judgments you're making and the ethical decisions you're making, he's done that. And I, again, have seen the difference that it made, especially during the COVID pandemic, of what it looks like to have that ethical, visionary leadership versus someone who's incredibly self-centered.
I want to go back.
So Tim Walz is saying that the leadership that Joe Biden has shown, and Kamala Harris, because she was the VP, were ethical, moral leadership, which obviously means that Tim Walz holds the same ethics and morals if he looks at their behavior as ethical and moral. So he looks at shutting down people's freedom on how they can function, open businesses where they can go during COVID as moral. He looks at giving free benefits to illegals as moral. He looks at allowing illegals to come into the country without vetting them as moral. And he looks at prosecuting your political opponent, even though they say that wasn't technically Biden's administration and the Democrats, but I can assure you the way he's talking, that means he's in line with the moral decisions of Biden, the Democrat Party, which was part of that was prosecuting and currently is prosecuting Donald Trump just because he is an enemy politically. That tells you a lot about Tim Walz.
It looks like to have that ethical, visionary leadership versus someone who's incredibly self-centered.
I want to go back to something you said on Tuesday. You said, I think all of us know the Electoral College needs to go. But the campaign came out later that night, and they said that's not their stance.
Well, it's not the campaign's position. And the point I'm trying to make is that there's folks that feel every vote must count in every state. And I think some of folks feel that's not the case. Our campaign does that. And the point I'm saying is I'm in 5 states in 2 days. We're out there making the case that the campaign's position is clear, that that's.
So he cites the fact that the Electoral College needs to go. Well, I'm out here talking to a bunch of people at different states because they feel like their vote doesn't matter. But we, the campaign, are out here talking to them to show them their vote does matter. But he's kind of saying that they think their vote doesn't matter because of the Electoral College. And he says, okay, well, that solution is get rid of the Electoral College. But he can't say that, so he's still saying that us as a campaign are making people feel like their vote matters, even though us as a campaign, we want to keep the Electoral College. That means that Tim Walz doesn't really want to keep the Electoral College. It's just the campaign. But his logic doesn't make sense. We're assuring people their vote matters, even though deep down I think we need to get rid of the Electoral College to make sure their vote matters.
And some of folks feel that's not the case. Our campaign does that. And the point I'm saying is I'm in 5 states in 2 days. We're out there making the case that the campaign's position is clear, that that's not their position. Their position and my position is to make sure that everybody understands their vote, no matter what state they're in, matters.
So that's something that you and Vice President Harris disagree on?
I have spoken about it in the past, that she's been very clear on this, and the campaign, and my position is the campaign's position.
So it's really not his position. He's just kissing ass and saying what he's got to say to get in line. And he slipped up. He got loose at a private fundraiser. I don't know how that quote got out because he didn't say this at a rally. He said it at a big, powerful, a big, powerful party collection of powerful people where he let that slip out and it got reported. And now he's having to walk it back.
And let's talk about the economy. That is the top issue for voters out there. 74% of voters said the past year they've had to cut back on groceries because of the rising costs, of course. And a lot of those voters, they're concerned that they cast their vote for Kamala Harris, but she's responsible for that. So how do you reach those voters? What do you say to those voters who may blame her for the economy right now?
Yeah, folks in the middle. Well, we talk to them about what are the policies that are going to make a difference. And we see some of the data, but data doesn't impact people in their daily lives. Go into the grocery store and you see false information, whether it's bird flu impacting eggs. But the reality for most people is if those costs are up, they want to know what you're going to do about it. I think that's why she's focusing on making sure whether it's home ownership more affordable, tax cuts for the middle class, and let's just be candid about this. There's price gouging piece of this.
And something that former President Trump said, something that within your debate they were saying that, hey, these are policies that Kamala Harris could have done 3 years ago when she was in the White House with President Biden, and she never did. What do you say to people who bring that up, who say that?
Well, Donald Trump had 4 years to do it, if you're going to talk about that. And what the point is, you need a partner in Congress.
What? Trump made the economy better. What are you talking about? And the only reason Biden could say he made the economy better was because the economy was at a low point when he entered in because of COVID. And naturally, it was going to re-rise. But if she's saying that there's all these issues, she was a part of those issues. What the logic of voters is smart. Tim Walz is trying to walk around it.
You've seen these. We've seen different bills that are ready to pass, and Donald Trump makes sure he steps in. We saw it around immigration.
Oh my God!
A bipartisan bill, widely respected, wanting to make a difference in this, holding true to our values, securing the border. Donald Trump steps in and says, "Look, that's going to hurt my political future. Let's not make it happen."
Let's talk.
Take a moment of frustration with me. You can even comment sigh down below. Ugh. Bipartisan bill that was widely respected. He's talking about the bipartisan border bill that was proposed that Donald Trump and other Republicans said, screw that, to. It was proposed recently as this election was ramping up because the border was a huge issue for voters, and they were seeing that the plans of the Biden administration to just let all these illegals walk in was not something that voters liked. And so they tried to save it with this little bill at the end, act like they care about border security, that all the establishment people will pass. And Trump's like, yo, they're just using it right now during the election to say, we passed something for border security, we care about this. When that's not the case. If you just think you can figure that out.
Let's talk about your record. And you call yourself a knucklehead. Call yourself a knucklehead.
Get him,
because you made
Strahan.
some statements that just aren't true. And the comment about weapons of war that I carried in war, which you didn't. You said that you were in Hong Kong during the Tiananmen Square massacre when you weren't. You kind of chalked it all up to bad grammar. Or getting the dates wrong. But your opponents say you lied to make yourself look better. Do they have a point?
Well, look, 35 years ago, got the opportunity to be in Hong Kong, be in China, learned a lot about it, served 24 years in the National Guard, passionately, in an instance, talking about gun violence in schools, on an instance there, proud of the service that I've done, proud to be a teacher in that classroom, proud to have been very public all these years, and owning it when I, said, look, I was there in August of '89. And I think what you see here, you saw it in Minnesota. I've been elected 8 times here. These things have been very public for folks here. They see the results of things that we pass.
That's
we
a
see
good
a state
answer,
that's
man.
a top 5 state for business. We see 3rd best state, top 3 state for raising a child, and we've got the best health care. And I think the policies, whether it be dealing with China and understanding China's human rights record, what you can be certain there is that Kamala Harris and I aren't going to, pick dictators on speed dial. See, Xi Jinping is doing a good job during COVID, as Donald Trump said, and I think those lessons learned over a lifetime of being very public, whether it's in the classroom or being elected.
Which Tim Walz, he has said some BS and some lies to try to make himself look good. It's so true. But these guys are also under a ton of pressure. You say one thing wrong, you get criticized like crazy. So that is part of it, but he's also made some blatant lies to make himself look good. And the negative thing about, having dictators on speed dial. I'd rather have someone like Trump who's willing to actually deal with these dictators and other world leaders and stand up to them, like putting tariffs on China or making threats and negotiations with leaders, whereas someone like Tim Walz or Kamala Harris would be like, They might lie, they might say the wrong thing. They might be like Kamala Harris where they can't even handle speaking without a teleprompter in front of them. No, sorry, Timmy Tim, I'd rather have Trump.
Well, but it's one of the things with trust. So there are going to be some people who say, we can't trust him to even tell the truth about himself.
Yeah.
Boom.
What do you say to them?
Get him.
Well, I said they know who I am. I know who I am. I know the work that I've done. I know that things get spun in a political environment. But I think what they see is, if they want to compare that, talking about immigration policy or seeing the things that Donald Trump would say, I think there's a big difference than missing a date when you're there and, again, spinning something for a political reason. I'm very clear of who I've been. I'm very proud of 24 years of doing that work, and I think going to Congress and working for veterans, they want to see it and make the difference look a little different. I think people in Minnesota, my students, the folks I've worked with, members of Congress, they know who I am, and they know the policies we put in place have made an impact.
That's a pretty good answer. That was a nice, well-trained answer. That was impressive.
And Vice President Harris said that she told you to be a little bit more careful on how you say things.
Well, I
Says a lot coming from Kamala, who has 14 different accents.
did it, even the other day of just speaking passionately about these gun violence situations and meeting with these survivors. I've sat in the room with the Sandy Hook folks, a friend with David Hogg, who's been an activist on this. People know in that, and then that gets spun in that, well, he didn't say something true. It was very clear that I was talking about these veterans, very clear that I wear, I wear my emotions on my sleeve, and I do think in these positions, whether it be governor or being vice president of the United States, you do need to be careful. You do need to be a little more thoughtful on it. And I think what you see is as someone who's been in classrooms a lot, I've been around coaching a lot, I speak passionately, and I think doing that, you need to combine the two. And I think that's what she's referring to.
Which is so true, because you do need to combine it. We all know that. We also don't understand the pressure these guys are under. But it is true that he is way more of an emotional guy, Tim Walz, in the way he expresses himself, than someone who's super measured like the opposite VP candidate, J.D. Vance, who's super measured, tremendous communicator, was a lawyer, versus Tim Walz, who was a teacher, coach, now a politician. He's exciting, he's motivating. Sometimes he sounds weird. He's not as poignant and to the point and impactful with his words, in my opinion, than J.D. Vance. But sometimes J.D. cannot be sounding as like exciting and motivating. And really, as a leader, you want someone motivating, but you really want someone that is tactful, well thought through, knows how to handle situations, a tremendous communicator, which is why J.D. Vance, showed him outshined him in that VP debate. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, seeing a little more about Tim Walz and having to backtrack his stance where he disagrees with Kamala Harris about the election process. It's Sean Daniel here. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one. Or you can just like the video. Ciao, ciao.